William and Kate's Story, Part 1. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, casting long shadows across the breakfast table where Prince William sat with his hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long grown cold. Kate moved quietly around the kitchen, her usual graceful composure replaced by something more fragile. The children's laughter from the garden seemed distant. It's almost muffled by the weight of the conversation they'd had the night before. William's phone buzzed against the wooden table. Another message from his private secretary about the upcoming announcement. The palace had been preparing for weeks, but nothing could have prepared them for this moment. Kate paused at the sink, her shoulders tense as she watched a robin land on the windowsill outside. "The children don't know yet," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the dishwasher. William nodded, unable to find the right words. How do you explain to a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old that their world is about to change forever? The diagnosis had come 3 weeks earlier, delivered in the sterile environment of a private medical facility in London. The words had hung in the air like a physical presence, changing everything in an instant. Kate had gripped William's hand so tightly that his wedding ring had left a mark on his finger. The doctor's voice had been gentle, but clinical, explaining treatment options, timelines, and the importance of maintaining normalcy for the family. Since then, they had moved through their days like actors in a play, smiling for the cameras, attending engagements, and tucking their children into bed each night with the same bedtime stories. But behind closed doors, they had spent hours researching, consulting with specialists, and trying to process the magnitude of what lay ahead. William remembered the moment Kate had first felt unwell. It had been during a routine engagement at a children's hospital in Manchester. She had excused herself quietly, and when she returned, her face was pale but determined. She had finished the visit, met with every family, and posed for countless photographs. It wasn't until they were in the car heading home that she had mentioned feeling dizzy. The weeks that followed had been a blur of medical appointments disguised as private meetings. Kate had undergone test after test, each one bringing more questions than answers. William had canceled several engagements, claiming scheduling conflicts, while secretly accompanying his wife to consultations with some of the country's leading oncologists. Now, as they sat in their kitchen, the reality of their situation felt overwhelming. Statement would be released later that morning, and their lives would never be private again. Every aspect of Kate's treatment would be scrutinized, analyzed, and reported on by media outlets around the world. The children would face questions from classmates, and their family would become the subject of countless conversations in households across the nation. Kate turned from the window, her eyes meeting William's across the room. Despite everything, she managed a small smile. "We'll get through this," she said. William heard the determination in her voice that had first attracted him to her all those years ago at university. "We have to." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted their quiet moment. George appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, followed by Charlotte and Louis. The normalcy of their morning routine felt both precious and heartbreaking. Kate moved to prepare breakfast, her movements automatic despite the turmoil in her mind. William watched his family, knowing that in a few hours, everything would change. The palace machine would swing into action, statements would be issued, and the world would know their private struggle. But for now, in this moment, they were still just a family having breakfast together, and that was enough to hold on to. William and Kate's Story, Part 2. The black car pulled up to the private entrance of the London clinic just as the afternoon rain began to fall. Kate pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, not from the cold but from the anxiety that had been building all morning. The public statement had been released 2 hours earlier. Already her phone was buzzing with messages from family and friends around the world. William reached for her hand as they walked through the corridors toward the oncology department. The hospital staff had been briefed about maintaining privacy, but Kate could still feel the weight of curious glances. She had always been comfortable in public, but this felt different. This wasn't about royal duties or public engagements. This was about her life, her future, her ability to watch her children grow up. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the consultant oncologist, greeted them with the kind of warm professionalism that Kate had learned to appreciate over the past few weeks. Consultation room was bright, and modern, with large windows overlooking the London skyline. Kate tried to focus on the view rather than the medical charts, and scan results spread across the doctor's desk. The response to the initial treatment has been encouraging, Dr. Mitchell began, her voice measured and reassuring. The tumor has responded well to the chemotherapy, and we're seeing significant reduction in size. This puts us in a much better position for the surgical intervention we discussed. 8. Kate felt William's hand tighten around hers. They had been preparing for this conversation for days. But hearing the word surgery still sent a jolt of fear through her system. She thought about Charlotte's upcoming birthday party. It's about Louis's first school play. About all the moments she might miss if something went wrong. What does the timeline look like? William asked, his voice steady despite the emotions Kate could see flickering across his face. They had agreed that he would ask the practical questions while she focused on processing the medical information. We'd like to schedule the surgery for next month, Dr. Mitchell replied. This will give us time to complete the current round of chemotherapy and allow Catherine's body to recover sufficiently. The procedure itself should take about 4 hours, and we expect a recovery period of approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Kate's mind raced through the calendar. 6 weeks would take them through the Easter holidays, through the children's school term, through several important royal engagements that would now need to be canceled or postponed. She thought about the disappointment of the charities she patronized, the events that had been planned months in advance, the people who would be affected by her absence. The children, Kate said quietly. How much should we tell them? Dr. Mitchell leaned forward slightly. In my experience, children handle honesty better than adults often expect. They can sense when something is wrong, and uncertainty can be more frightening than age-appropriate truth. I'd suggest explaining that Mummy needs an operation to make her feel better, that she'll need to rest for a while afterward. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from post-operative care to the likelihood of additional treatment. Kate found herself taking notes, her handwriting becoming increasingly shaky as the reality of the situation sank. She had always been organized, always prepared. But nothing could have prepared her for this. As they left the hospital, Kate noticed a small group of photographers waiting across the street. The palace had requested privacy, but she knew that. Every public appearance would now be scrutinized for signs of her condition. She straightened her shoulders and managed a brief smile, the same composure she had maintained through years of royal duties. The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Kate watched the familiar streets of London pass by, wondering how many more times she would see them, how many more normal days they would have before everything changed again. William's phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, his palace staff, and government officials, but he ignored them all. I want to tell the children tonight, Kate said suddenly, before they hear it from someone else, before the rumors start at school. They deserve to hear it from us. William nodded, pulling into their driveway. Together, he said simply, and Kate knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a family. The conversation with the children would be the hardest thing they had ever done, but it was also the most important. Their family's strength would be tested in ways they had never imagined. But Kate was determined that love would see them through. William and Kate's story, Part 3, the sitting room at Adelaide Cottage, had never felt smaller. Kate sat on the sofa with Louis curled up beside her, his small hand absently playing with the buttons on her cardigan. George and Charlotte sat cross-legged on the carpet, their faces turned up toward their parents with the kind of complete attention that children reserve for moments they sense are important. William had suggested they wait until after dinner, after homework was finished in the evening. Routine was complete, but Kate had insisted on earlier. The longer they waited, the harder it would become, and she needed to do this while she still felt strong enough to be reassuring. You know how sometimes people get sick and doctors have to help them get better? Kate began, her voice gentle, but clear. She had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times, but now, facing her children's trusting faces, the words felt inadequate. Charlotte nodded seriously, like when Louis had his ear infection and needed medicine. Exactly like that, Kate continued. Well, the doctors have found that Mummy has something in her body that shouldn't be there, and they need to help me get rid of it. George, always the most perceptive of her children, leaned forward slightly. "Is it serious?" he asked. And Kate could hear the worry in his 9-year-old voice that he was trying so hard to hide. William moved to sit on the arm of the sofa, his hand resting on Kate's shoulder. "It is serious," he said honestly, "but Mummy has the very best doctors, and they have a plan to make her better. She'll need to have an operation and then rest for a while." Louis looked up at his mother with wide eyes. "Will it hurt?" Kate felt. Her throat tightened, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "The doctors will make sure I don't feel any pain during the operation. Afterward, I might feel tired and need to rest more than usual, but that's normal. It's how bodies heal." The questions came slowly at first, then in a rush. How long would the operation take? Would she have to stay in the hospital? Would she lose her hair like the lady in the movie they'd watched? Question felt like a small knife to Kate's heart, but she answered them all as honestly as she could. Charlotte was the first to cry. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she processed what her parents were telling her. Kate opened her arms, and Charlotte crawled into her lap, followed quickly by Louis. George remained where he was, but Kate could see him struggling with emotions too big for his young mind to fully comprehend. "I don't want you to be sick," Charlotte whispered against Kate's shoulder. "I know, sweetheart," Kate replied, her own tears finally falling. "I don't want to be sick either. But sometimes these things happen, and we have to be brave and help each other through them." William knelt down beside George, who was staring at the carpet with fierce concentration. "What are you thinking about, buddy? Will Mummy die?" George asked quietly. The question that had been weighing on all their minds finally spoken aloud. Kate felt William's sharp intake of breath, but she knew this was the most important question to answer. "The doctors don't think so," she said firmly. "They caught this early, and they have medicines and treatments that work very well. I'm going to fight this as hard as I can because I love you all so much." The conversation continued for another hour, with the children asking questions about school, about upcoming events, about what would happen to their normal routines. Kate and William answered everything as best they could, trying to balance honesty with reassurance. Finally, Louis fell asleep in Kate's arms, exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening. Charlotte had stopped crying but remained close too. Her mother, while George sat quietly, processing everything in his thoughtful way. "Can we help?" Charlotte asked suddenly. "Can we do something to make you better?" Kate's heart swelled with love for her daughter's desire to help. "You can help by being yourselves," she said. "By continuing to do well in school, by being kind to each other, and by giving me lots of hugs. That's the best medicine of all." As William carried Louis upstairs to bed, Kate remained on the sofa with George and Charlotte. The hard part was over, but she knew this was just the beginning. There would be difficult days ahead, times when she would be too tired or sick to be the mother she wanted to be. But looking at her children's faces, she saw not just fear, but also resilience, love, and determination. "We're going to be okay," she said, more to herself than to them. "We're going to be okay." George finally moved closer, settling beside his mother on the sofa. "I'll take care of Charlotte and Louis when you're resting," he said with the seriousness of a much older child. "I'll make sure they're not scared." Kate pulled him close, marveling at the strength and maturity of her eldest son. "We'll all take care of each other," she said. "That's what families do." William and Kate's story, Part 4, The Pre-Dawn Darkness, wrapped around the London clinic. Like a blanket, as Kate sat in the hospital bed, watching the city slowly wake up through her window, William dozed fitfully in the chair beside her, his usually perfect posture replaced by the awkward angles of someone who had refused to leave his wife's side. The surgery was scheduled for 7 o'clock, still 2 hours away. But Kate had been awake since 3. She had said goodbye to the children the evening before, choosing to spare them the anxiety of a hospital visit on the morning of the operation. Charlotte had made her a drawing of their family holding hands under a rainbow, which now lay on the bedside table next to flowers from well-wishers around the world. Louis had insisted on giving her his favorite stuffed elephant for luck, and George had written her a letter that she had promised not to read until after the surgery. The night had been long and filled with the quiet sounds of a hospital at rest. Nurses had checked on her regularly, their soft voices and gentle manner providing comfort in the darkness. Kate had used the time to think, to pray, and to prepare herself mentally for what lay ahead. She thought about her own mother, about the strength Carol had shown during her own health challenges, and tried to draw from that same well of resilience. Dr. Mitchell arrived at 5:30, her presence bringing a sense of calm efficiency to the room. She reviewed the surgical plan, once more explaining each step with the kind of detail that Kate found reassuring. The operation would be complex but routine, she explained. The kind of procedure the surgical team had performed hundreds of times. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Mitchell asked, settling into the chair on the other side of Kate's bed. Scared, Kate admitted, the honesty surprising her, but ready. "I want to get this over with, so I can start getting better." William stirred at the sound of voices, immediately alert despite his exhaustion. The past few weeks had aged him, Kate noticed, new lines appearing around his eyes and a weariness in his posture that hadn't been there before. He had been her rock through all of this, but she knew the strain was taking its toll. "Any word from the palace?" Dr. Mitchell asked, referring to the media management that had become a necessary part of Kate's treatment. "They'll release a statement once the surgery is complete," William replied. "Until then, we're asking for privacy and prayers." The prayers had been pouring in from around the world, messages from heads of state, religious leaders, and ordinary people who had been touched by Kate's story. The palace had been overwhelmed by the response, with flowers, cards, and well-wishes arriving by the thousands. Kate found it both humbling and overwhelming to know that so many strangers were thinking of her family. As 6 o'clock approached, the hospital came alive with the purposeful activity of a new day. Kate could hear the sounds of breakfast being prepared, phones ringing at the nurses' station, the quiet conversations of staff beginning their shifts. Soon, she would be part of that activity, wheeled into an operating room where skilled hands would work to remove the threat that, Lisette, invaded her body. The anesthesiologist arrived with his team, their cheerful professionalism helping to ease the tension in the room. Kate had always been good in crisis situations, her years of royal training serving her well in maintaining composure under pressure, but this was different. This was about her life, her future, her ability to be there for her children. "I need you to promise me something," she said to William as the medical team prepared for her transport to the operating room. "If something happens, if something goes wrong, I need you to make sure the children know how much I love them, every day. I need you to tell them stories about me, about us, about how happy we were." William's face crumpled slightly, but he nodded. Nothing is going to happen," he said firmly. "You're going to come through this, and we're going to watch our children grow up together. We're going to be grandparents together. We're going to grow old together." Kate smiled, reaching for his hand. "I know, but I needed to say it anyway." The moment arrived with surprising suddenness. The gurney appeared, the surgical team gathered, and Kate found herself being wheeled through corridors she had never seen before. William walked beside her, his hand never leaving hers, until they reached the doors of the operating room, where he would have to wait. "I love you," he whispered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I love you too," she replied. "Take care of our babies." As the doors closed behind her, Kate closed her eyes and thought about the future she was fighting for. Birthday parties and school plays, Christmas mornings and family holidays, all the ordinary moments that made up a life. She thought about Charlotte's laugh, Louis's hugs, and George's thoughtful questions. She thought about growing old with William, about the life they had built together and the life they still had ahead of them. The anesthesia began to take effect. Kate Shay's last conscious thought was of her family, waiting for her to come home. William and Kate's story, Part 5, The Recovery Room, was bathed in soft afternoon light when Kate finally opened her eyes. The surgery had taken longer than expected, nearly 6 hours. But William's face was the first thing she saw when consciousness returned. His eyes were red with exhaustion and relief, his usually immaculate appearance rumpled from hours of waiting. "How do you feel?" he asked softly, his hand finding hers beneath the thin hospital blanket. Kate tried to speak but found her throat dry and scratchy. A nurse appeared with ice chips, helping her moisten her lips before she could manage a whisper. "Tired," she said finally. "How did it go?" Dr. Mitchell materialized beside the bed, her surgical scrubs replaced by a fresh white coat. "Better than we hoped," she said with a smile that reached her eyes. "We were able to remove everything we could see. The margins are clean, and the lymph nodes we tested during surgery came back negative. It's the best possible outcome we could have asked for." Kate felt tears of relief slip down her cheeks. It's the fear that had been her constant companion for weeks began to loosen its grip on her chest. "The children," she managed to say. "They're at home with your mother," William replied. "I called them as soon as Dr. Mitchell gave us the news. George asked very serious questions about your recovery timeline. Charlotte wanted to know if you could have ice cream. Louis just wanted to know when he could give you a hug." Despite the pain medication making her drowsy, Kate smiled. Children's reactions were so perfectly them, George's practicality, Charlotte's focus on comfort, and Louis' simple desire for physical closeness. "When can I see them?" "Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it," Dr. Mitchell said. "We want to monitor you closely for the first 24 hours, but after that, short visits should be fine. The real recovery will happen at home." The next few days blurred together in a haze of pain medication, gentle physiotherapy, and gradual improvement. Kate's room filled with flowers from well-wishers, cards from school children, and personal messages from family and friends. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, but it also provided strength during the difficult moments when pain made it hard to imagine feeling normal again. William barely left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair and eating cafeteria food without complaint. He helped her with the simple tasks that had become challenging, walking to the bathroom, getting dressed, brushing her hair. His gentleness surprised her, this tender side of him that had emerged fully during her illness. "You don't have to stay," she told him one evening, as he settled into the chair with a book. "I know you have obligations, duties to attend to." "My only duty right now is to you," he replied firmly. "Everything else can wait." The children's first visit was emotional, but healing. Charlotte burst into tears the moment she saw her mother. Not from sadness, but from relief. Louis climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of the tubes and wires, and snuggled against Kate's side. George hung back initially, his young mind still processing the reality of seeing his mother in a hospital. "Bed. You look tired," he said finally, his 9-year-old honesty cutting through the careful politeness of adults. "I am tired," Kate admitted, "but I'm getting better every day. The doctor said I can come home soon." "Good," George said, moving closer. "Louis keeps asking when you're coming home. And Charlotte won't eat her vegetables because she says you're not there to make them taste good." Kate laughed, despite the pain it caused. "Well, we can't have that. I guess I better get better quickly so I can make vegetables taste good again." The week in the hospital passed slowly, but steadily. Less day brought small improvements, less pain, more mobility, clearer thinking as the medication was reduced. Kate began to feel like herself again, though she knew the real recovery would take months. Dr. Mitchell visited daily, monitoring Kate's progress with the same careful attention she had shown throughout the treatment. "The pathology results are excellent," she reported during one visit. "All the tissue we removed was successfully extracted, and there's no sign of spread. We'll need to do regular monitoring, of course, but the prognosis is very positive." Kate felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she had been carrying. "What does that mean for the future?" "It means you have every reason to expect a full recovery," Dr. Mitchell said. "It means you'll be there for all those important moments with your children. It means you and William will have the future you've been planning for." On the day of her discharge, Kate stood by the hospital window one last time, looking out at the London skyline. A week ago, she had arrived here uncertain about her future, scared about what lay ahead, and now she was going home to her children, to her life, to the future she had fought so hard to protect. William appeared beside her with her discharge. "Papers and a small overnight bag. Ready to go home?" he asked. Kate nodded, taking his arm as they walked toward the door. More than ready. As they left the hospital, Kate felt the warmth of the sun on her face and realized that it had never felt so precious. every sensation. Every moment, every breath felt like a gift. She had been given her life back, and she was determined not to waste a single day of it. William and Kate's story, Part 6, 3 months after the surgery. Kate stood in the garden at Adelaide Cottage, watching her children play on the swing set that William had installed during her recovery. The late spring sunshine felt warm on her face, and for the first time in months, she felt truly present in the moment. The fear that had shadowed every day was finally beginning to fade, replaced by a deep gratitude for the ordinary miracles of daily life. Her hair was beginning to grow. Back, soft and slightly different in texture than before. She had chosen not to wear the wigs that had been carefully selected for her, instead embracing the visible signs of her journey. The children had been fascinated by the changes, Louis particularly delighted by the feel of her short, fuzzy hair. "Mummy, come push me," Charlotte called from the swing, her voice bright with laughter. Kate walked over slowly, still mindful of her body's limits, but growing stronger each day. The simple act of pushing her daughter on a swing felt like a privilege, a reminder of how close she had come to missing these moments. William emerged from the house with a tray of tea and biscuits, a domestic scene that would have been impossible to imagine months earlier. He had taken extended leave from his royal duties, choosing to focus entirely on his family's recovery. The palace had been understanding, recognizing that this was about more than just personal choice. It was about the future of the monarchy itself. Dr. Mitchell called, he said, settling beside Kate on the garden bench they had bought just weeks before her diagnosis. The 3-month scans are completely clear. No sign of any remaining cancer cells. Kate felt her breath catch. She had been trying not to think about the appointments scheduled for the following week, the scans that would determine whether the treatment had been completely successful. "All clear?" "It's all clear," William confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. She said, "You're officially in remission." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Remission, not cured. Kate had learned that cancer survivors rarely used that word, but free from disease, given a reprieve, allowed to move forward with hope instead of fear. Kate felt tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in months, they were tears of joy rather than anxiety. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "I actually can't believe it." The children, sensing something important was happening, abandoned their play and gathered around their parents. George, always perceptive, studied their faces carefully. "Good news?" he asked. "Very good news," Kate said, pulling all 3 of them close. "The doctors say I'm better, really better." The celebration that followed was quiet but profound. They ordered pizza for dinner, let the children stay up past their bedtime, and spent the evening talking about the future in ways they hadn't dared to do for months. Kate found herself making plans again. Charlotte's upcoming school play, the summer holiday they had postponed, the royal engagements she would gradually return to. "I want to do something," Kate said later that evening after the children had finally gone to bed. "Something meaningful. This experience has changed me, changed how I see everything." William nodded, understanding without needing explanation. "What are you thinking?" "I want to help other families going through this," Kate said. "I want to use my position, my experience to make a difference. Maybe start a foundation or support existing organizations. I don't know exactly what yet, but I know I want to help." The conversation continued late into the night, as they began to envision how Kate's experience could become a source of hope and support for others. The platform she had as a member of the royal family could be used to raise awareness, reduce stigma, and provide practical help to families facing similar challenges. Over the following weeks, Kate began to feel her strength returning, not just physically, but emotionally. The fog of fear and uncertainty that had clouded her thinking for months began to lift. She started taking longer walks, spent more time in the garden, and gradually began to engage with her royal duties again. The first public appearance was at a small charity event for cancer research, chosen carefully to mark her return to public life. Kate had worried about how she would be received, whether people would see her as fragile or different. Instead, she found herself surrounded by warmth and support. People who had followed her journey and were genuinely happy to see her, healthy and smiling. "You look wonderful," an elderly woman said, taking Kate's hand during the meet and greet. "My daughter went through the same thing last year. Seeing you be so open about it gave her strength." Kate felt the truth of her new purpose in that moment. Her experience, as difficult as it had been, could become a source of hope for others. The fear and uncertainty, the long nights and difficult conversations, the surgery and recovery, all of it could have meaning if it helped even one family feel less alone. As summer approached, Kate stood once again in her garden, but this time she was planning rather than just surviving. She was designing a cancer support garden that would be part of a new initiative she was launching. The garden would be a place of healing and hope, where families could find peace during their own difficult journeys. William found her there, sketching ideas in a notebook while the children played nearby. "Any regrets?" he asked. Settling beside her on the bench that had become their place for important conversations, Kate considered the question seriously. The past year had been the most challenging of her life, testing her in ways she had never imagined. But it had also revealed strengths she didn't know she possessed, deepened her relationships, and given her a new sense of purpose. "No regrets," she said finally. "I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I wouldn't change it either. It's made me who I am now, and I like who I am now." William smiled, taking her hand. "I like who you are now, too." As the sun set over their garden, Kate felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but no longer frightening. They had faced the unthinkable and emerged stronger, more grateful, and more determined to make every day count. The door to what lay ahead was finally open, and Kate was ready to walk through it.